Hello everyone, good morning and a very warm welcome to our Get Your Payroll Done webinar for Sage 50 Cloud Payroll. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter, and we are joined today by my colleagues Calvin, Catherine and Tim, who are all standing by in the background ready to answer any of your questions. Let's now take a look at what we're going to cover in this webinar. So I've split it into three sections. We're going to start with preparing to process a pay run. So a couple of tasks to work through before you actually enter the current wages. We're then going to get that payroll done, and I'm going to take you through a typical pay run, focusing on the 5 key tasks to complete a pay run. And then we're going to look at the end of the tax month and some of the tasks you'll need to complete in preparation for making your payment to HMRC. And then we should have a few minutes at the end as well to stick around and continue answering your questions. So let's get straight on to preparing to process. And I have a 4-step checklist for you of things you'd need to do before you sit down to run your usual pay run. And those steps are, number 1, to add any new starters that's joined you since the last payroll you ran. Step 2 is to enter absences that qualify for statutory payments. So we're talking sickness, maternity, paternity, or adoption, for example. Step 3, if required, put employees not being paid on hold. So they could be seasonal workers, they could be on some unpaid leave currently. And step 4, if you receive electronic notices, check your secure mailbox for any new tax code or student loan notices, or if you still receive them in the post, make sure you've actioned any notices that you've received since the last pay run that you ran. So I'm going to run through some of those steps in the first demo of the webinar today. So let's just bring the slides down. And you'll see I'm already signed in to Sage 50 Cloud Payroll. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new starter. And what I'm going to try and do throughout the webinar is share some hints and tips with you. So for even those that are used to running a payroll, hopefully you will learn at least one thing that's new in today's session. So when it comes to any new starter, they should bring with them either a P45 from their previous employer or a completed starter checklist, formerly known as a P46. Now the P46 is what we still refer to that form as in the program, but HMRC have renamed it starter checklist. And you can actually get a copy of that checklist online if you do a search for HMRC starter checklist, or there's a link on the handout. And just to show you what the form looks like, it's designed for use for anyone that doesn't have a P45, but it's actually a really great way for any new starter to capture all the personal details that you'll need to set up their record. It tells them to use their full names, captures date of birth, NI number, for example. You'll get them to choose the statement that applies to them, and that will determine the tax code used if they don't have a P45. And it also gives them information about the various student loans that they might be repaying. So if they are repaying a student loan, they'll be able to tell you what plan they're on by completing this form. So you'll need one of these for anyone without a P45, but you might want to use this form for all new starters, just so that you're capturing the full information that you'll need to set them up. So back to the demo, we're taking on an employee that's actually going to be replacing one of our current employees. And a quick tip for you, if you'd like to copy certain settings from an existing employee record, such as the pay elements that are assigned and the department that they're in, if you select that existing record first before you create the new one, and I've selected employee 3 in my list, if you then go to your employee tasks and either open the employee wizard or the quick employee option, whichever one you would usually use, because you've got someone selected, you'll see a message along the lines of this one. So do you want to base the new employee on an existing record and copy over information? So I'm going to click yes, and you'll see some of the information that's copied over. And I'm just going to go through very quickly and enter the details. So the employee name, the address and postcode. Put some contact details in and an email address, especially if you'll be using our online services to host Payslips. We'll just pop the date of birth in and we'll indicate we've done our right to work checks And if you want to record any details of documents you've checked, when you're setting up a new employee, you can click on the details option and you can record the document type here. So the passport number, for example, can be recorded. And then we'll just go ahead and fill in the employee's start date. So starting on Monday coming. We could enter bank details if we want to record them, or perhaps use e-banking or salary payments to pay them. And then up here in the top right-hand corner is where we would either enter the P45 details if they brought one in, or we would use the information from that starter checklist. So if you do have a P45, it's the date they left the previous employment, total pay and tax, and the tax code from that P45 that you'll need. But you will also need to choose a starting declaration, which is why that starter checklist can come in handy even if they do have a P45. Or in this case, because they didn't have a P45, I'm just going to choose P46 instead. I'm going to choose the statement that the employee selected, and that's actually assigned them to the emergency tax code, 1257L, on a week one, month one basis, based on that starter statement. And then we can go ahead and fill in the rest of the information, such as the national insurance number and the employee's NI category. So they're not continuing a student or postgraduate loan, so I'm going to set them at no. You'll see the department has been assigned automatically. I'm just going to pop in the gross salary, because this will be a salaried employee, and it's already assigned the overtime payment as that has been based on that existing record. Now, one thing to quickly point out is that I have not assigned a pension scheme at this point. Now, if you use the pensions module to manage your auto-enrollment duties, the pension scheme would be assigned when you complete a pension assessment and the system validates that the employee is eligible and needs to go into a scheme. Or if you're doing your auto-enrollment manually, you should still check and do a manual assessment the first time you pay the employee, and if they need to be auto-enrolled, at that point, you would manually assign the pension scheme. So we're not doing that at the point we set up the record, but we've got enough information there to save the details. So as I've only got one employee to set up, I'm just going to click Save and Clear. But if you save and retain, it'll keep some of those details that were copied earlier. And you'll see there a couple of messages pop up. And then we have our new employee at the bottom of the list. So as well as those pay elements, other information it's copied includes the payslip comment, if you're using that this tax year, for the uplift in NIC. So that's been copied from the previous record. And I'm just going to add some additional information to the salary. And that is the employee's contracted hours. I'm just going to pop that in per week. And the reason I need to do that is for our submissions to HMRC, you need to include the number of hours usually worked. And also, the overtime pay element in this case is a factored payment. So it's being calculated based on the salary and contracted hours at time and a half. So we need to enter the contracted hours for that factored payment to work. So there we have our new starter. We use the starter checklist in this case, but if you have a P45, you would enter those details. So next up, let's talk absences, and specifically statutory absences, so those that qualify for statutory payments. And I actually have an employee who will be starting her maternity leave this month, and I just want to show you a really handy way of quickly entering the maternity details. So first thing I'll do is I'll select the relevant employee, it's employee 4, who'll be going on maternity leave. And then from the employee tasks, you'll see I have various recording options. And the one I'll choose is recording maternity. So that takes you into the quick SMP screen, where we can confirm that we've received the medical evidence. We can enter the baby's due date. We can check that the employee is entitled to the payment. So we can see here all qualifying conditions have been met. And then it's just a case of recording the employee's last day of work. And the SMP will begin the day following that last day of work. So in this case, they've worked up to Friday the 9th. The SMP period will begin on Saturday the 10th of September. You'll see a series of key dates. You can actually print this information you think you might need it. And then you've got the entitlement to statutory maternity pay in this case. So they're getting 6 weeks at the higher rate based on their average earnings and 33 weeks at the standard rate. And that's all you would need to do to start processing statutory maternity pay. You can actually come back and fill in the actual date of birth and return to work date if it's not known at this point. So we've got everything we need. I'm going to click save and then close. And I'll show you that maternity pay a little bit later in the demo when we come to check the payments. So now on to step 3, and this is to put employees who are not being paid on hold. So I'm just going to show you where that setting is, because actually all of my employees are being paid. But if you have got seasonal workers, casual workers, or those that are on any kind of unpaid leave, you should put them on hold in your payroll. And that way, it'll avoid accidentally updating any payment values for them. And it will also allow you to include their details in your next FPS and mark them as an irregularly paid employee. So there'll be a pop-up that comes up the first time you do an FPS after putting someone on hold, and that's how you can include them as irregularly paid. So the on hold setting is within the employee record. It's the status, which is usually set to OK. But if someone isn't working right now, but they're still on your books, you still employ them, you put them on hold and you would save that employee record. So I'm not going to do that, but I did want to show you where the setting is. And lastly, before we get going on the pay run, we're going to check for any new tax code or student loan notices. If you receive these notices electronically, so if you usually sign in to your PAYE online account to get these notices, you might not know that you can actually retrieve them directly in your payroll software, and you can apply any changes directly to the relevant employee. So you do this via the secure mailbox, which can be found from the e-submissions tasks. So if I click e-submissions, you'll see IR secure mailbox. It's just up here in the tasks. And if it doesn't check automatically, you'll need to click the option to check for new mail, and that will then connect to your online account. It'll check for the various different types of notifications, and if there is anything new that you need to apply, it will organize those notices into folders under where it says HMRC mailbox. So for me, there are no changes I need to make. I've applied everything that's been sent through prior to now. So I can come out of the secure mailbox, and I have now completed my preparation. So that is your checklist to prepare to process. Started by adding any new starters. We've entered some absence for some maternity leave. If there's anyone not being paid, so not working, put them on hold. And if you get electronic notices, check your mailbox and apply any new notices that you may have received. And the link to that starter checklist is available on this slide, should you wish to download the handout. So now that that's done, we're ready to actually process our payroll. So let's get this payroll done. And I'm going to start by giving you an overview of 5 of the key tasks that you'll need to complete. So this is a very basic pay run, and your first task would be to set your process date. Now this will determine the tax period for all calculations, but it is also reported as the pay date in your submission to HMRC. So it should reflect the date your employees receive their pay, or if the usual pay date happens to land on a non-banking day, you would record it as the usual pay date, but you'd actually pay your employee the previous banking day, or in some cases, the next banking day. But the key here, it's the date the employees receive their pay, not the date they worked up to, not the date you're sitting down to actually run the wages. You're then going to move on and enter the payment and deduction values where necessary. You're then going to produce pay slips and reports. There's a few different pay slip formats that I'm going to run through. You'd need to update the records, which will confirm the values for the current period and make them historical. And then finally, we're going to submit that information as a full payment submission to HMRC. So let's get on with our first step and take a look at setting the process date. And if I just jump back to the demonstration, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear any selections that I made previously by clicking this clear button at the top. And if I go to the employee tasks, so down here in the bottom left corner, I've clicked on employee. We can start to work through these tasks from top to bottom. So this is the order in which you would complete them. Or if you're new to the software, you might find it useful to switch to the process map view. So in the top right-hand corner, you'll see it says change view, and you'll be able to select payroll process. If you're on the payroll tasks, you can resize these windows, and you'll see there are tasks that you can then follow running left to right. So don't be overwhelmed by the number of tasks you see. A lot of them are optional. I'll mention some of them as we go through the pay run, but it's up to you whether you work through the tasks here in the left-hand side or the tasks in the process map. So first thing you can see is changing the process date. So you'll be prompted for a process date when you first log into Payroll. It defaults to the current date, but we need to actually set it to the date the employees will be paid. So in my case, they're paid on the last day of the month, which this month will be the 30th of September. That's what I've set as my process date. It's already set the tax period, tax month 6, and I would click OK to save that date. And that can then be viewed in the bottom right-hand corner down here on my status bar. Now, next thing we'll need to do is to select the employees we want to pay. If you've got a simple payroll where everyone is paid on the same pay date and they're all the same pay frequency, a quick way to select all of your employees is to simply clear any current selection and then click swap. And you'll see there that everyone on the list is highlighted. And if there's someone on that list that's not being paid for any reason, you'd either put them on hold and they'll be automatically deselected when you go to enter the payments, or you could manually deselect them before you go into the pay run. If you've got a more complex payroll, you might want to use the outline feature to organize your employee list. So to explain how that works, if you click on outline at the top of the employee list, it'll open up some folder structures here on the left-hand side. The default structure is it will split by pay period. So if I had a monthly and a weekly payroll, this is a convenient way to select all of my monthlies or all of my weekly paid employees. So I don't actually have any paid weekly, but you can also split that down to department level in this case. So if there's certain values that you like to enter by department, you could choose employees assigned to a specific department from this filter. But I'm going to try and keep things simple today. We're going to process all employees on the same pay date. So that's what I've selected in this section, and I can click outline again just to hide those folders. So we've set the process date, we've selected the employees we want to pay, and our next step will be to enter their payments. In fact, I will select the employees again. So once I've got them selected, I can either jump straight down to the enter payments option just here in the payroll tasks, or I'll find the same option in the process map. But just to mention, one of the tasks you can run before you enter the payments, there is a reset payments wizard, which is handy if you're running more of a variable pay run where hours or rates frequently change, because that gives you the opportunity of resetting everything either to 0 values, to default values, or retain the information from the last pay run. And you can do that selectively based on the type of payment. So just show you the wizard. I'm not going to run through it all, but in the reset payments wizard, if you choose the option to selectively reset, that gives you the most control over what this wizard is doing. You can then work through the various payment types. You can decide what you want to do. So if, for example, I wanted to clear all overtime hours at the start of the pay run, I could use the reset payments wizard to clear the hours or number for the overtime payment. You could do something similar perhaps with bonus rates or anything that you might want to clear down before you start the pay run. Now, actually, I'm not going to use this because mine's a mostly static payroll. So I'm just going to cancel out of the reset payments wizard. But that's something that you could use before you enter the payments. So let's get into the enter payments option now. I'm just going to click it here from the tasks on the left-hand side. It will show you the details for the first employee in the list you've selected. So names appears at the top of the list just here. The payments and deductions are split into separate tabs running across the top. And then there's a few navigation options where you can move to your next employee, first or last in the list. Or you can even select a specific employee that had been highlighted for your pay run. Another quick tip, if you're in the middle of a pay run and you need to check something in an employee record or make a quick change to an employee, you can actually do this from the pay run without cancelling out and having to go back in to enter payments by using this icon at the top of the screen. That takes you directly into the relevant employee's record. And from here, you can look up the information, make any changes you need to. Once you've saved those changes, it takes you back to where you were in the pay run. So quick through, look at some of these tabs. Main one is the payments. So we've got here a salary payment. We've also got an overtime payment. And because it's got a multiplier, it means that the rate has been calculated automatically. So you can put the number of hours overtime worked. If there's any bonus this month, we could put the bonus amounts in. That starts to build up the gross pay here at the summary at the bottom. And then if you've got any of your own voluntary deductions, they would show on the deductions tab. Attachment of earnings orders, company loan repayments. You've then got a view of the absence diary. And this is a handy way to update any sickness if you're in the middle of a pay run. And then you've got a summary of payments and deductions. And this would be where you'd come if you want to check things like pension contributions, student or postgraduate loans. There's the information tab, giving you all of the values used in calculations, and you can even make notes for your own records for the pay run, and these can be found in the employee history, in the history tab in their record, once you've updated the records. So I'm happy with the values for this first employee. This is the net pay that she will receive. And to move on to the next one, I would simply click Save/Next. So you would then repeat these steps. So for employee 2, I have got a salary sacrifice deduction in place. You can check the summary, make sure I'm happy with the payments and deductions, and then repeat for each employee that you had selected. Now for employee 3, if you were here at the start, you might have seen that this was the employee I selected when I set up my new starter. And the reason for that is they're actually leaving this month. And because they're not working for the full month, I will need to do a manual adjustment to their salary. And I'll also need to consider any other final payments that should be processed before I give them their P45. So this particular employee will be leaving on the 23rd of September. And I've done a manual calculation. So I've worked out that they're working for 17 of the 22 working days this month. So the way I'm going to reduce the salary is I'm just going to make an adjustment to the hours value. And this little icon next to it brings up a little mini calculator. So if I do 17 divided by 22, that reduces the hours, and in turn it also reduces the amount of salary. Now you might have a different method for working out a pro rata salary if they haven't worked for the full period. So just refer to your own company policy on working out part payments. But keep in mind, it is a manual process. If they're leaving, you would need to work out what their final payment should be. And if there's anything else they owed, maybe any overtime they would usually get in arrears, do try to include that in the final payment so that it's all included on their P45 when you give that out to them. Now, the other advice for leavers is to select the checkbox at the bottom of the screen. It is vital for certain types of directors to recalculate their national insurance if they're on the pro rata method. But good practice to tick the box for anyone who is leaving if it's their final payment, as a few checks will run in the background and you'll see some messages if you do need to take any action. So for example, this employee has an outstanding attachment order. So we'll need to notify the court or creditor that the employee is leaving. And it also tells me my next steps for a leaver. So we would need to update the records to ensure that this final payment is recorded correctly, and then process the lever details before making your full payment submission. So we will come back to that later on in the demo. So I'm just going to quickly run through the rest of these employees. Employee 4 was the one starting maternity leave this month. So looking on the summary, you can see the statutory maternity pay is calculated automatically. That's calculated up to the process date. So I'll need to do some adjustments to the salary again. Now, because this employee is a member of our company maternity pay scheme, they've got an entitlement to full pay for this month. So I'm actually going to use the make up basic option to do an automatic adjustment to their salary. So the amount I want them to receive in total has been entered as the salary, like so. And on the summary tab, if I click make up basic, it'll prompt me to adjust a payment, adjust salary in this case. And if I click yes to continue, you can see it automatically brings down the salary so that the employee receives in total their usual gross pay, and they have their usual deductions for pension tax and national insurance. So you can do this if there's a set amount you want to make up to, in this case, the usual salary, or if you don't have a company maternity or paternity scheme, a bit like that starter or lever, you need to work out how much salary you want to give them for the time that they worked. So I'm just going to save the default payments for the rest of the employees. Most of them are on fixed salaries. Do have a few that work variable hours. So I'm just going to type in the number of hours worked, maybe off their timesheets. And then finally, we have our new starter. A bit like the lever, if they haven't worked for the full month, you need to manually reduce their salary. So this employee is working 52 out of 22 working days. And if you're not using the pensions module, you would do your own assessment to see whether they need to be put into the pension scheme at this point. Or if you are using our pensions module, you'll run the pension assessment option next, and that will determine if they're eligible, and if so, they'll put them into the scheme, produce letters, etc., ready for you to send them. So those are the payments entered for these employees. And if you check out the employee list, you'll see there's a column with the heading last calculated. That now shows my 30th of September pay date, confirming that I've entered payments for that period. So a quick alternative to enter payments if you're dealing with hourly paid employees is the timesheet entry option. You can see it here in the process map. The way that this works is it only gives you the option to enter the hours worked. So the rates need to be set in the employee record, but you can enter everything in one screen. So it might be a quicker way to enter things like overtime payments, working through entering the hours for the relevant employees, or for these employees who are paid by the hour, this would be a quicker way to enter the number of hours worked. So that's timesheet entry. It's an alternative if you are paying hourly. So let's just recap where we are up to in the pay run. So we set our process date, the date the employees will receive their pay. We've entered the payments, but if required, we could reset the payments first. We could use timesheet entry to quickly enter hours worked. And if you're using our pensions module, you'd run your pension assessment next, and that will deal with anyone that needs to be enrolled. Also gives you the opportunity to deal with opt-in and opt-out requests. And there's a quick reminder of the enter payment screen. You can jump into the employee record should you need to, navigate between the different pay elements using the tabs at the top. You'd record your hours and rates, and once you're done, use save/next to move on to the next employee. So halfway through the webinar and halfway through the pay run, we've done all the data entry. We are now ready to produce our payslips and reports. So 3 different ways you can produce payslips in Sage 50 Cloud. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of that. And then we'll give you some demos of Payslips and recommended reports. And I also want to show you the report selections feature, which is a great way of creating a reports pack with all of your payroll information in one place. But let's just start with Payslips. So the three formats available to you in Sage 50 Cloud Payroll are online payslips, where they'll be uploaded to Sage HR online services. And employees can access them payslips in a mobile app or from any internet browser. You can email payslips. By default, they'll be sent from Microsoft Outlook. You'll be able to add a payslip password that the employee needs to enter, or you can print the payslips either onto plain paper or onto printed payslip stationery. But do be aware that payslip stationery is no longer available direct from Sage. So you would need to get those from third-party sellers if you still want to use stationery. But if you're printing onto plain paper, I'll share a tip with you in the next demo. So we'll take a look at the payslips now. So we've been through, we've entered the payments. The next option I'm going to run is pre-update reports. You can see it's just here in my payroll tasks, and it is also here in the process map. And the first thing you see in pre-update reports are any reports you've added to your favorites. So I've actually added a payslip to my favorites as well as some payment summary reports, which I'll show you in a sec. But if you are going to be printing your payslips, you'll need to choose your preferred layout, either matching the stationery you have, or if you're printing onto plain paper, doesn't really matter which one you choose. But they're organized into folders for dot matrix printers, if you've still got one of them, or for most of you here, probably laser printers or inkjet printers, where you would typically print onto A4 paper. Now, I've just added this first one to the favorites. It's the standard laser payslip. And if I preview the report, so I've selected it and I'll click preview. I have also set these employees up for online services. So if you're running a printable payslip and you've done that, it asks you if you want to include employees set up for online in the printed version. So I'm just going to click yes, so that I've got a full set of payslips. And then we'll see the report preview appears on screen. So it includes payslip comment. If you've added that into the employee record, breakdown of the payments, number, hours, and rate. We've got the various deductions, including the pension contributions and all of the year-to-date figures. And this down here in the bottom right-hand corner is the employee's take-home pay. Now, if I was to print this directly onto plain paper, the only thing that would actually print out are the words and the numbers. So you wouldn't see that green background, we call it a template, you wouldn't see that template on the printed version if you do a direct print from this screen. So that doesn't matter if you're using stationery, doesn't particularly matter if you're printing onto plain paper, but if you want to include the boxes, my tip to you here is to export it as a PDF and then print the PDF. And that way you will get everything you're currently seeing on this report preview. So if I hit export at the top of the screen here, I'm just going to pop them on my desktop just for easy access. These are my September payslips. And if I hit save, I've then got a copy of those, either for my own records or to print out onto plain paper. And this way it will also print that green background. So various other layouts available. Some include the address. If you're still posting your payslips, that's probably the one you would choose. And some's designed for the security payslip stationery. Now, whilst we're in the reports, you'll have seen in my favorites, I added a couple of payment summary reports. So at a minimum, you'll need to produce payslips as that's a legal requirement. We also recommend running payment summary part 1 and 2 and keeping that on file for your own records. So they're in my favorites, but if they're not in yours, go to the summary folder. And if you scroll down, they are listed alphabetically. You can click on the star to add these reports to your favorites. So I'll do a preview of part 1. Basically gives you a breakdown gross to net with a line for each employee. So total gross pay, PAYE, national insurance, pension contributions, statutory payments, and breaking it down to the net pay on the right-hand side. So that's part one. And then part two, to complement part one, gives a bit more detail around employer information. So this one, again, I'll zoom in, has the employer NI contribution, the employer pension, also confirms tax codes and NI categories used at the time. So if you're going to print anything, definitely print payment summaries parts 1 and 2. But wouldn't it be great if there was a way of bundling reports together and perhaps producing a single document with all of your payroll information? Well, you can actually do that by setting up a report selection. You'll see here there's a folder for report selections, and here's one I created earlier. I'm just going to edit the report selection so you can see how it's been put together. So basically gives you the same folder structure that we're seeing here in the pre-update reports, and you would run through and you would add the reports that you want to include in your selection, and that will then give us the option of running all of those reports at the same time and then exporting a single PDF with all of our payroll information. So it's just taking a few seconds to load up there. You can see there are 4 reports in total added to my selection. So payment summary part 1 and 2, I've got a pensions report. This one where you can't see the title, it's actually the payslip. It's that first standard payslip that I've added to the selection. And by running this, and again, I'll run it to preview. You can get all of your reporting done at the same time. And on the preview screen, it'll separate them into tabs. So I've got my payslips, payment summaries, and a pensions report. And all I then need to do from any of these tabs is to click on the small arrow next to the export option, choose to export all as a single document. I might call this one September Payroll Reports Pack. And then we'll have that one place with all of our reports all grouped together. There you go, I think that's done now. So I'll close out of the preview. You can even add report selections to your favorites. So to streamline the process, you could just come into this menu, run this one report selection, and that's all of our reports done. To show you what they look like, a couple of PDFs I exported. These were the payslips. As you can see, it's included the green background, so that will print out exactly how I see it on screen here. Or my reports pack. This is where everything was bundled together. 9 pages in total, starting with the payslips, taking us through payment summaries 1 and 2, and also that pensions current report that I added as well. So that's printing pre-update reports. I also want to quickly show you the upload option. So if you set up online services, you'll be able to upload payslips to Sage HR, and your employees can then access them from a web browser or mobile app. So I've already set it up for this company. And to produce the payslips and get them uploaded, you would just choose this option in the payroll tasks, upload online payslips. That'll then display the employees that are set up for this option, along with their gross and net pay values. If you're on our latest version of online payslips, you'll get an option to schedule them into the future if you want to set a schedule date, or you can publish them immediately. And when you click onto publish payslips, that's them done. And those payslips are now available for our employees to view. Or if you set a schedule date, they will be available for your employees on that date. I just want to show you how that looks to an employee. So here's an employee that's logged into Sage HR just from a standard browser. You'll see on the dashboard, it does mention the Sage HR mobile app. So they'll be able to download that on iOS or Android. But if they're in a browser, just go to the Payslips and P60s. They get a full list of payslips, including any historical payslips you've uploaded, which they can then view on screen, like so. They can save as a PDF if they need to share it or print it. They can even get access to their P60s if you've been uploading these as part of the year-end process. So that's our P60 for the previous tax year, again with the option of saving the full PDF as well. So that's online payslips. We do have a separate webinar on this, so you can either sign up to the next session or catch our recording available in the Help Centre. So that's payslips and reports. Let's just quickly recap what we've been through there. So we've looked at online and printed payslips. If you follow the link on the handout for email payslips, that'll take you to our support article explaining how that works. We then have our recommended reports, payment summaries part 1 and 2. And why not use report selections to create that reports pack, add it to your favorites and streamline that reporting process. So up next is to complete the payroll by updating the records. And then if required, posting the nominal link and running the lever wizard. And then we will submit our payroll to HMRC as a full payment submission. We're then ready to start thinking about month end. So quick demo of these final steps. So we've looked through all of our pre-update reports. We're happy with all the values that have been entered and that we're seeing on the payslips. So we are going to go ahead and update the records. So a really important step, saves the current period's payments to the employee's history. Also takes an automatic backup of your data, which can come in very handy, but we would also recommend taking your own backup at the point you update the records. So let's take a look at that now. I'm just going to use the payroll tasks for this one. So we've still got everyone selected. I'm going to click on Update Records. There's a reminder to print the pre-update reports first. So I'm happy to continue. And then we have the backup prompt should you want to take a manual backup of your data. So strongly recommended. Just select the default settings. I'm going to call this one September pre-update backup. And that way I've got a point to restore back to should I need to after I've done all of the hard work of entering those payments. So once a backup has been saved, you're in the Update Records wizard. It confirms the pay frequency and number of employees that you're updating. It then shows the employee names, and when you click Finish, it confirms that your employees have been updated, gives you the next steps to process any levers and complete a full payment submission. And this one also mentions that I've paid some maternity pay and I'll need to complete an employer payment summary to inform HMRC. And that's part of our month-end tasks, which I'll come on to shortly. So records are now updated. The last updated column now displays the September pay date. And if I did need to make any changes to the September payroll at this point, I would either need to restore a backup or use the rollback wizard, or you would wait until your next pay run and you would correct it on that pay date. Now we do have a lever. We have an employee that received their final payment. So before we submit this information to HMRC, we need to run the lever wizard. So first things first, select the employee who is leaving. If you've got multiple employees leaving on the same date, you can select multiple employees at this point. You then need to go into the lever wizard. So there is a process levers option if you're following the process map, or you can jump to your employee tasks and you can click lever from the tasks on the left. And all you then need to do is to record the employee's leaving date. So Friday the 23rd in this case. You can print P11 deduction cards for your own records should you wish to. But I'm just going to skip ahead and print the P45 So always choose the plain paper layout, and this one does print the boxes for you. Then you can either directly print, or we can check out a preview first. And these are the P45 forms that we would hand out to the leaver. They get their own copy to keep. And parts 2 and 3, they would hand over to their new employer. So we'd print that out. We would click on to finish. Got that warning about the attachment order, just a reminder. And you'll see the current status now shows leaver, and the leaving details will be included in our FPS. Now, quickly squeeze a tip in at this point. If you want to hide leavers from your list, if you want to remove them, you can go into the criteria option and you can select exclude employees who are current year leavers. And that'll take them off your employee list. The employee 3 has gone. You need to bring them back, go back into criteria and remove the tick for current year leavers. You can see that they are back in the list. So my final step is to submit this payroll to HMRC. Just going back to the payroll tasks. You'll see that is the full payment submission task, which I can run from either of these areas. You don't have to make a selection at this point. It will always include any employee that's been updated and who hasn't previously been included in an FPS for this period. So I can just go straight to full payment submission. Ignore the warning. I'm only getting this because I'm in the training room, but you'll get a screen similar to this telling you you're submitting a full payment submission. These are your user ID and password, etc. And this is a summary of the information you're submitting. So this is for tax month 6, breaks down the liability per employee, made up of tax, national insurance, and student loan contributions. We've got leave dates and start dates there for any starters or leavers. So all I then need to do is to submit this on or before the employee's pay date. So you'll see the progress bar move across. And when that's finished, you should get confirmation that your submission has been successful. And then our last FPS date column falls into line with last updated, and that confirms that we have completed our pay run for our 30th of September pay date. So just to recap those final steps, update records and then post nominal link and run the lever wizard. Really important that you do levers in the right sequence. So update first to record the final payment, lever wizard to produce the P45, full payment submission includes the leave date. So that's why you do the lever wizard first. And then submitting to HMRC, as you've just seen, it includes starters and leavers, employee details, taxable payments, and the liability. That needs to be sent on or before the pay date. Right, so last 5 minutes or so of the presentation is going to focus on our month-end tasks. So shorter checklist for you on this one. So in Sage, run your P32 report, which will break down the payment that is due. If required, submit your employer payment summary or EPS, and then make that payment to HMRC by the deadline, which is the 19th of the following month if you pay manually, 22nd of the month if you pay electronically. Now, just a note, when we're talking about month end, we are referring to tax months, which start on the 6th day of the calendar month and end on the 5th day of the following month. So the current tax period is tax month 6. It's just started, 6th of September to the 5th of October. So it's important that you complete all pay dates within that date range before you move on to your month-end processes. So if you pay monthly, it's dead simple. Just do your monthly payroll, then do month-end. If you pay weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly, do make sure you've completed all payrolls with a pay date up to the 5th of the next calendar month, so that you're not missing out any payments from your P32 totals. So this is a quick look at what's on a P32 report. I will show you where to run it in the demo. But basically, it's totals for the tax, student loans and national insurance that will have been submitted in the FPS. It then shows any adjustments. So if you're still claiming employment allowance, that'll be deducted. If you've recovered statutory payments, that is deducted. If you're paying apprenticeship levy, that will be added on to the amount due. And at the bottom of the report, you'll find the total amount to pay to HMRC. So let's take a look at that report in the demo. I've completed all of my payroll for that tax period. So I can either look within the payroll links section, where there's a direct link to the P32 report, or we can go into the main reports option. I've added it to my favorites, but it's in the period end folder, and the one you're looking for is the Form P32 Employer Payment Record. Now, when you run this report, it'll ask you for the tax month you're running it for. So in my case, doing it a bit early, it's a September tax month. And there you'll see on screen all of the figures. So PAYE and student loan, national insurance, final lot of employment allowance, I think I'm reclaiming here, as well as some statutory payments, which has then reduced the amount due accordingly. So this is the amount I need to pay to HMRC, the 1689.40. But because we do have some of these adjustments, so the SMP recovered in this case, we will need to submit an EPS to HMRC so that they have the full information on how much we're going to be paying. So export a copy for your own records if you want a PDF or print it out. And once you've run a P32, if you check your company settings and go on the HMRC Payments tab, you'll see that the amount due has been recorded automatically. And this is also where it's been tracking our employment allowance. So I've actually claimed the full £5,000 now. And because we did that recovery of statutory pay, we also need to do an EPS submission. So a couple of places you can find it. It's in the payroll links, employer payment summary, or also on the e-submissions tasks, you can do an employer payment summary from here. So I'm sending one because I'm reclaiming statutory pay. So that is the option I would choose in the wizard. I've recovered statutory payments. It's for tax month 6. These are the values I've recovered for the tax year to date. So next month when I do this, this will show the cumulative value. It's not just for the individual month. CIS deductions suffered would only apply to you if you're in the construction industry scheme. You're reclaiming those deductions. And apprenticeship levy tends to be for larger businesses that are liable to pay that. So if I complete the wizard, I would then do the submission. This one's only done at the end of the month. So even if you pay weekly, this is at the end of the tax period, the tax month. And that will fill in the gaps. It'll inform HMRC how much you're reclaiming this month. And that way, everything should square up when you come to make the payment. So that's my EPS done. That's month end complete. These are the reasons why you would submit an EPS. So if none of this applies to you, you don't need to do an EPS at the end of the month. There'll be no values to submit. And the deadline for this submission is the 19th of the following month, in line with the manual payments deadline. And that is the end of the presentation. And we have about 5 minutes left for you to get any final questions across to our panel to be answered in the Q&A. So while you're doing that, I'd just like to run through some of the further support that we have available for you. So starting with our online help center, which you can access in product by clicking the help center icon, or from any browser on any device at sage.co.uk/help. You can search for keywords to find the relevant articles. You can read our curated support guides. There's a webinars option in the help center towards the top where you can see upcoming sessions. There's also a link from the webinars to view our recordings, and you'll see shorter video demos throughout, as well as the contact options should you need to get in touch with our support team. The other thing I want to mention, something new to Sage, is Sage membership. It incorporates Sage University at sageu.com, Sage City, our online community, sagecity.com, and Sage Masterclass. More information about the first season of our member masterclass is on the current slide. I'll let you have a read through that. All the details are on sage.com, so you can hear from these keynote speakers all about finding and keeping great people. So do check out the member masterclass. If you want to know more about Sage membership, we also have a webinar coming up this month. So do check out our upcoming webinars if you want to sign up. So we're at that point where we've got a few minutes left. I can see the guys are furiously answering those questions. So do keep any of those final questions coming. It's also your last chance to download the handouts. So head over to the documents icon if you'd like a PDF of the presentation or a printer-friendly version, which we've added on there for you. If you're interested in any of our other upcoming webinars, and we've got a few of them this week in celebration of National Payroll Week, including our big Sage Payroll quiz coming up this Thursday at 3 p.m. Do check out our upcoming sessions either from the Help Centre or following the links in your follow-up email. Or you can go to sage.co.uk/webinars and find the details from there. So I'm just going to go on to mute for a couple of minutes whilst we answer those final questions. For those of you leaving now, thanks so much for joining us at the webinar today. For everyone else sticking around for the Q&A, I'll be back with you in a couple of minutes when it's time to say goodbye. Okay, so thanks so much for sending those questions through. It looks like the guys have answered pretty much all of those. So I hope you found those answers useful, and a big thank you to Tim, Catherine and Calvin, busily working behind the scenes. We are now out of time, I'm afraid, but if you are coming along to our pensions webinar tomorrow, we look forward to seeing you then. Do check out the big Sage Payroll Quiz of the Year this Thursday, 3 p.m. in honour of National Payroll Week. It'd be great to see as many of you who can attend come along to that for a bit of fun. But for now, we are going to call it a day. Thanks once again, everyone, for joining us. I do hope you found our webinars useful. Look out for your follow-up email, and if you can spend a moment to provide any feedback in the survey that appears, we would very much appreciate that. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye. Stay safe. We look forward to seeing you on some other webinars soon. Bye-bye for now.